The idea is that if you get your garden bed ready, and basically it involves cleaning up and enriching the soil and taking care of things, then it's easier to plant in the spring. You're ready to go.
Yes,
because fall marks the end of this growing season and the beginning of the next one. And it feels like fall, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Last few days.
It's cool. All right, this will give you an idea, because what we're talking about when we need to get cleaned up is before the frost, the heavy frost. So this is the thing for Shazy, and if you look at, I'll go to 50%. By September 28th, we can expect temperatures down to 32, which is frost or freezing. If you live in Dannemora, you have until October 4th. And if you live in the Peru area, you have until October 1st. So those are kind of guidelines for us, depending on where you live. And if you live anywhere else, you can Google the National Climate Data Center, put in your zip code, and you'll get one of these. Okay. A light freeze is 29 to 32, and all your tender plants are killed. Moderate is 25 to 28. It's widely destructive to most vegetation. Severe is 24 and colder, and it'll damage all your plants, or most plants. So you want to be prepared for these things. Frost-sensitive vegetables: tomatoes, pumpkins, sweet potatoes, cucumber, okra, eggplant, corn, and peppers. And the frost-sensitive flowers: fuchsia, bougainvillea, begonias, impatiens, geraniums, and any succulents you might have. So this tells you that because tomatoes especially are frost sensitive, if we are getting close to a frost, or the weatherman says we're expecting a frost, or you know by the temperature, you want to protect them, okay? You can pick your green tomatoes when you get close to that point. If you're not going to pick them yet, cover them up with a towel or a sheet, pillowcase, anything like that, so that the frost isn't touching the tomatoes. Don't use plastic, because that kind of transfers the cold. But if you pick them when they're green, you can store them when they're dark, in a dark place around the house temperature. Put them in a box, put them in with a ripe tomato or even a banana, because the ethylene that ripe vegetables put off will help to ripen the tomatoes. Okay, don't ever refrigerate a tomato. It takes all the flavor out. Any questions about that? No, y'all good? You'll notice this picture came from the empressofdirt.net. Very cool site. She's a piece of work. She's very entertaining and very knowledgeable. Empressofdirt.net. Okay. You hear about frost on the pumpkin. It's not a good thing. Frost kills the pumpkin. It makes the rind rot. So if you have pumpkins, you want to do the same as when you, with a tomato. If you have a couple of pumpkins, you know, you're planting for your family or your grandkids or whoever, you want to cover them again with a sheet or something like that, so that the frost is off them. And then during the day, when it's warmer, you can remove it. Or pick the pumpkins. Or pumpkin. Okay, one of the important things when you're gardening is, okay, somebody couldn't get in. You have to keep good records. I do it with pictures. A lot of people do it with some kind of a garden journal. You want to know what you planted and what kind of varieties they were, how much you planted, whether or not it was too much or not enough, when you planted and when you harvested. And this is important for when you planted, because insects have certain times when they invade. So if you can avoid planting before the cutworms come in, and plant after the cutworms are there and gone, then you're going to save a lot of your plants. You want to journal how it did, how your plants did, whether you want to plant it again or not. Maybe you didn't care for the variety. Maybe you didn't like the way it grew or looked or tasted. So you want to change it. Where you planted it is really important for crop rotation. Vegetables are in families. The most common one that we know of or that we usually think of is tomatoes. Tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, and potatoes are in the same family. So when you plant tomatoes in one area, the following year you want to plant them somewhere else if possible, for a couple of reasons. When a tomato takes out certain nutrients from the soil, it also leaves maybe spores of different kinds of fungus or disease in the soil. So you don't want to plant something in the same family. You don't want to plant tomatoes there. You don't want to plant peppers there. I know I don't have a lot of room, so I have 2 tomato plants right now in my flower bed, and they're doing fine. I've never planted tomatoes in my flower bed before, but they're doing wonderful. But I won't plant them there next year. You want to rotate them, if you can, to every 3rd year. Okay? You want to keep track of what your soil amendments you've used, so that if you put in, especially if you're changing pH, and we'll go into that later, you want to keep track of when you did that, because you might need to do it every year. You might need to do it every 2 years or every 3 years. I found out the hard way about knowing where I planted something the year I had scabiosa. I planted it one year. The next year I didn't recognize it when it was coming up, thought it was weeds, threw it in the pile. And then when I was sitting there thinking about it, and I thought, oh darn, but it was too late. I couldn't save it. It was already dried out. If I had taken pictures when everything was in bloom and looked at the pictures, because your phone saves them forever, I would have known that's what they were. And I would have left them long enough to make sure they were actually weeds. Of course, scabiosa. I've never grown it since. Okay, things to think about. Did you have any problems with your garden this year? Insects, diseases, or weeds? And what did you do about it? How could you do it differently? And choose resistant varieties. There are no varieties of, say, tomatoes that are that will never get something like early blight, but there are some varieties that are resistant. They're less likely to get it. Early blight and septoria leaf spot are very, very common in tomatoes here. We get a lot of calls about it or photos of it, but they aren't a death knell for tomatoes. They're not the same as late blight. You don't have to pull your plants out, but you do need to deal with the fungus. Okay. We have a thing in the office every year. Cornell puts out it's maybe 4 or 5 pages, both sides, with disease resistant varieties of almost any kind of vegetable you would want. If you're interested in something like that, you can email me and I'll mail it to you. So it's something to think about. Okay. Sanitation. It's crucial. You want to reduce the number of disease-causing organisms and insect pests for the next gardening season, or they will winter over. Remove and dispose of all your plant materials that have signs of disease. Powdery mildew, we have a lot of that. Septoria leaf spot, early blight, or any plant parts with spots should be discarded or burned. Don't put them in your compost pile unless you know for a fact that it gets hot enough to destroy the organisms. And for us here in the North Country, that's not likely that it'll get hot enough. So to be on the safe side, you might want to just get rid of it. discard it, burn it. You want to rake up all your plant debris in and around the garden beds, and that includes weeds. A lot of insects, a lot of diseases winter over in weeds, weedy areas. Insects can hide in stems, but I want to show you this is, let me see. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see myself, so I don't know. Let me see here. Let's see. Okay, there I am. This is a piece of a hollyhock stem that's dry and it's completely hollow. Completely hollow. It's a good place when during the growing season. Bumblebees like to take shelter in here. A lot of pollinators will take shelter in these because they have to stay dry. Bees can't fly well when they're wet. Butterflies can't fly well when their wings are wet. So if you leave things like this out until the very last minute, then you're providing a place for the pollinators to take refuge. Whoop, there it goes. Okay. These are some of the diseases that we have most often. Anyone recognize this bug up here on the left-hand corner? Yeah,
Japanese beetle.
we just love that thing. I know Janine in Portland, they've got the, now my mind won't think of what it was. She had blank out things that I don't like. What is that? The, come on, guys. What is this bug? Japanese beetle.
Japanese.
Japanese beetle, yeah.
Yeah. They make a terrible mess of any plant. What is this one over here that looks like spit? Does anyone know?
Spittlebug.
Spittlebug, yes. How about the one underneath the spittlebug?
Oh, she's had.
It is rust. Rust. And the tomato, what's wrong with this tomato?
Blossom rot.
Blossom end rot. Blossom end rot. Is blossom end rot something that you can do anything about for next year? Is that a spore or anything that's going to stay in the soil? No. What causes blossom end rot? Does anyone know?
Watering.
Watering. It's a lack of consistent watering. If you look it up online or anywhere else, it's going to tell you that it's a lack of calcium. But here in the North Country, we have plenty of calcium in our soil. And what causes blossom end rot is we have a tendency to, for instance, I didn't know it was going to rain today. If my plants needed water yesterday, and I thought, well, gee, it's going to rain tomorrow night, and so I don't bother to water them. That's what you get when you get blossom end rot. You have to water them when they need it. If they don't have enough water, the roots can't take the calcium up from the soil, go all the way up the stems, through the leaves, because a lot of the moisture is lost through the leaves because of transpiration. And when the leaves get dry from transpiring, they suck up more water. So the water never quite gets all the way to the end of the tomato. And so the calcium doesn't get all the way to the end of the tomato. And as a result, you get blossom end rot. So it's important that you water when your plants need water. Blossom end rot also affects eggplants, peppers, all the things in the nightshade family. The same as the tomatoes, potatoes get blossom end rot. So these are some of the diseases that and insects that you want to make sure that you're not wintering over in your garden. Yellowing leaves are usually caused by some kind of a disease. Mealybugs, powdery mildew, spots or patches, whitefly, aphids, gray mold, red spider mites, leaf fall, and rust. Okay, so you want to get everything out of there, clearing everything out from underneath, including the weeds. Okay, these are the three most Most likely. Can you see all three?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Okay. These are the three very common things with tomatoes in particular. Does anyone know what this one is? The one on the left? It is early blight, and it's recognizable because the spots on the leaves are concentric circles, like a spiral almost. The one in the middle is septorial leaf spot, very similar to early blight, except there's this yellow halo around the spots. Okay, and the one on the far right are galls. Now, the septorial leaf spot and early blight, very, very common. They start from the bottom and work their way up your tomato plant. Has anyone had experience with these?
I have with the early blight.
With the early blight? Okay. And what did you do about it?
I just kind of pick the leaves off and continue, let the tomato plant continue.
That's exactly what you have to do. You have to take the leaves off as you see them being damaged on septoria and early blight. Just remove the leaves, dispose of them. Don't throw them on the ground by the plant because this produces spores. And if it gets really bad and you need to stop it, you can use an organic fungicide. And that slows it down anyway, stops it dead in its tracks sometimes. But it
What would you recommend, Jolene?
What?
What would you recommend?
Well, the one I use is called Daconil, DACONIL. And then the galls, what is a gall? Anyone know what a gall is? We're going to come to galls again later. So let's move on to this powdery mildew. When a leaf has powdery mildew, it stops the photosynthesis because the light can't get to the leaf. The leaf you usually drop. Because of the lack of photosynthesis, you don't get the same kind of produce that you want. So this is a problem. This is a daconil problem too, a fungicide. Or if you don't want to use a fungicide, it's you can mix 1 part 2% milk with 4 parts of water and spray it, and it kills the powdery mildew. You have to repeat it fairly often, but it does take care of the powdery mildew, especially when you catch it early. Now, any information I give you has to be, because I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension, any information I give you has to be research-based. I can't just tell you, well, you know, if you dance and jump around on one leg naked, that'll take care of this. I can't tell you anything. I wouldn't tell you that even if it were true. But I have to give you information that's scientifically based and research based by one of the universities that takes care of these kind of things. There are a lot of them that
that
do.
Again?
Huh?
Could you repeat that again? The percentages?
1 part 2% milk to 4 parts water.
Okay.
And spray top and bottom of the leaves and the stems if it's on there. But spray the ones where it has it. And if you use non-fat milk, doesn't work. Whole milk is too strong because there's fats in milk. So 2%. Okay. And what's interesting is that powdery mildew is very specific to a host. So the powdery mildew on the squash plant is not the same powdery mildew on any other plant. Okay, it's specific to the host. That's why when someone brings us, I do a lot of diagnoses and identifications. If somebody brings me or tells me I have something on my plant, some white fuzzy thing, I'll first ask, what's the host? What plant is it on? A lot of diseases and insects are very specific to certain plants. And then you have the Japanese beetle who's not specific to anything. Okay, so knowing this will help too as far as planting. If this squash plant's getting powdery mildew, and even when you clean it out, there might be spores. You wouldn't plant squash in that same place. because that's where the powdery mildew that works for squash might be. You could plant another vegetable there that's in a different family and not worry about this particular kind of powdery mildew. It makes sense when you think about it. Okay, if your perennials look like this, whoop, sorry. Okay. All right, if your perennials look like this, anyone notice anything about this? Are they horseshoes?
The middles are empty.
in the
There's
middle.
nothing in
The
the middle.
round.
Yeah, they're all donuts, but what about the one in the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner?
Yes.
That.
Huh?
Snake.
A snake. There's a snake on top of it. I like that snake because he looks like a donut too, so I put him up there. I have a sick sense of humor. Okay, so if your perennials look like donuts, like this sedum, you see how it falls to the side and there's kind of a hole in the middle? We call that a donut, and it means it's time to divide it. It's too big for the space it's in, and it's falling to the side. It's just going to get worse. Parts of it are going to die off. So you need to divide plants. Look to see when you're checking your garden in fall, look to see what plants you might need to divide, okay? You can divide perennials in the fall, or you can wait until spring when they're first starting to break dormancy. Okay, planting garlic.
Mm.
Depending on your zone, and we are in either somewhere in between 3 and 5. I'm in 4. If you're in Saranac Lake, you might be in, one of the others. If you're in Dannemora, you'll be somewhere else. But climate zone 3 to 5, plant them no earlier than mid to late September. But the last date to plant them is early to mid-October. Normally, we think of planting cloves of garlic in October. That's the general rule of thumb. And when you plant, you take the garlic apart. You can use a garlic bulb that you got at the market, but if you can get one from a garden center, that's better, because sometimes the things that you buy in the market have been treated to keep them from rotting so soon, and you would rather not have that. It's not going to hurt you, but you're going to have better results or more consistent results if you buy a garlic that's made for planting. You break it apart, you take the cloves, you plant them pointed side up, about 3 to 4 inches down, and it'll be ready to harvest in July. So winter's over. Okay. Does anyone plant garlic?
I do.
You do, Diane?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have picked some up at the co-op. I think the girl's name is Kim, that grows a huge crop of garlic.
Mhm.
And I have successfully, I usually use my own garlic to replant, but I have, when I feel like I want to have more, I have used some of hers, and it's beautiful garlic and it works great.
Good. And it's good to know that she's a source of dependable garlic cloves.
It's not treated at all.
Yeah. Good to know. Everyone make a mental note about that. Okay, you want to plant your spring bulbs before the ground starts to freeze. I like this this kind of I don't know, this thing over here that shows you not just how tall different bulbs get, but it shows you how deep to plant them and when they bloom. So you have the bulbs that bloom early, like the crocus and the little daffodils, and then you have the ones that bloom in the middle of the spring, the big daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, crown imperials, and then you have the ones that bloom in late spring. So using a guide like this is really very helpful. If you're planting bulbs and you think, okay, how deep should I plant this, or when's it going to bloom? It gives you a way to make your bulb garden look the way you want to. And you want to plant them before the ground gets too cold. They have to kind of set their roots. They winter over. They have to have the cold in order to bloom. But the flower that you're going to see in the spring is already in that bulb. Okay. We have guides like this at the office. If anyone wants one, send me an email and I will make sure you get one. Do we have any questions about that, the bulbs? No? Okay, here we go.
I have one.
Okay.
How do you prevent squirrels from eating all the bulbs?
Good
When you
question.
plant your bulbs, if you put down a piece of screen, you know, like 1/4 inch, with 1/4 inch size spaces, kind of like, I guess it's more of a, well, fencing or something. Anyway, 1/4 inch or so, you put that over top of the bulbs. You put soil over the bulbs, and then you put down the screen, and then you put soil on top of the screen. And then in the spring, when you start to see signs of something coming up, you can remove it. And that way you won't have the squirrels eating it, you won't have the voles eating it, you won't have the skunks digging them up, because skunks really like bulbs too. And when clean up your area after you planted it. Does the skin on the bulb has an odor to it, which will attract bulb-eating animals. So don't leave the skin on, and you know, you're gonna have skin all over when you take the bulbs out of your package or your bag or whatever. But try to pick up as much as you can, because it's a calling card, you know, for the critters. And they're really annoying, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I
So they
also have a
don't
poll
come up
question.
underneath, I'm sorry.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
They don't
Dave.
come up underneath the bulbs? Like dig through the ground and
Maybe
come up?
a mole might. A mole might come up.
Chipmunks?
The others aren't way under the ground. They're going to dig from the top.
Oh,
You know, a
okay.
squirrel isn't going to go underground to get something. They're going to dig it up from the top.
But chipmunks?
Chipmunks don't tunnel under the soil either. I think moles tunnel under the soil deeply, and voles do, but not as deeply. We're going to talk about voles in a minute. They do a lot of winter damage. But I think if
Yeah.
anytime you put anything over it, or use, well, it's hard to do it when there are things you can use to, there are things you can do to put scent out that keeps the animals away. The coyote urine you can buy in garden supply centers, but it really stinks. It keeps cats away too, but it really smells bad. I had a neighbor when we lived in California who had cats, and they were out, especially at night, and they dug in my flower bed every night. So I got some of that coyote urine. It was so bad I couldn't open my windows.
Oh, no.
It was awful. But the cats stayed away from it. So did everybody else. It was bad. But they have different products like that you can try if you don't have the screen, or if you don't aren't getting the results you want. Okay. Okay.
I have a question about bulbs.
Okay.
I had some daffodils that came up and they had leaves, but they never developed flowers. Shall I pull those out or give them another year? What can I do about those?
Did they have good leaves and stems? Were they tall?
They looked great, only they had no buds.
I would wait until next year and see.
Okay.
Give them a chance, because if maybe what happened is that they had been because after they're done, they take all the nutrients from the leaves back into the bulb. Maybe they weren't allowed to do that for some reason. So I would let them take all the nutrients from your greenery, from your leaves, back into the bulb, and see if they use it to produce flowers next year. And if they don't, then I would replant.
Okay.
Anything else on bulbs? Okay. If you need to remove plants, and you will, in the process of clearing out and making your garden ready for spring, the flowers and vegetables who begin to brown and shrivel, you shouldn't remove them. This tomato plant, for instance, it's time to go. Pick your green ones if you want to, but it's not going to get any healthier. And if by the time frost comes, it's going to be completely dead. It's dying now. It's done. You know, most of the time when a plant flowers or produces fruit, we call any kind of a vegetable fruit. So if my squash plant is producing squash, it's producing fruit. Once it has a problem doing that, I'm not going to get any decent squash out of it. That's where I'm at right now. I'm going to be taking my squash plants out, or actually their cucumbers, out this weekend, and I'm going to put in lettuce and radishes and carrots, because there's no point in keeping them going when they're not going to produce what I need them to. But most things, flowers or vegetables, once they produce a fruit, once they produce a flower, their whole purpose in life is to do that, and then they die. Okay, then they die back. If it's perennial, they'll die back, or they don't keep producing until the next year. But an annual, for instance, or a vegetable, once they produce the fruit, they're done. That's why if you have a coleus or basil, when it starts to produce a flower, take that flower off. Snip it off with your fingernails or use a knife, whatever you have, but remove those flowers, because once they realize, oh, we're going to flower, we've finished our cycle, and they start to brown and die. But if you keep those picked off, they haven't put out their flowers yet. They haven't produced their seeds in order to, keep their the next generation going, and they'll grow a lot longer if you keep the flowers off it. It's the reason you deadhead too. Removing the spent foliage is an excellent way to reduce the chance for fungi and insect pests to overwinter. And you want to disinfect your trellises, your tomato cages, stuff like that, with a solution 2 parts water to 1 part bleach. You can wipe it off, wear gloves, of course, wipe it onto it, or you can spray it and just let it dry before you put it away for the season. That way it's ready to go for next year. Okay, herbaceous perennials. If you have like let's see, coneflowers, or I have a lot of perennials. I cut them off. There's 2 ways to do this. You can prune them now. You just cut them off at the ground. The crown of the plant is where the stems meet the roots. You can cut them off at that point. Don't leave a stump or 2 inches or something, because when it comes back in the spring, it's going to try to grow around that. So take it all the way down. You can compost it if it's clean. Okay, if it doesn't have mildew or spores of some kind, but if it's clean, go ahead and compost it. Okay. Some plants you want to overwinter because they look really good during the winter. They have a lot of winter interest. The grasses do. They also help with erosion if they're on a slope. So then you leave them until late winter, very early spring. Then you cut them back before the new foliage comes up. I have a tendency to leave mine until I can see the new foliage, and then I kind of use my hands to separate what's there, because I like winter interest. Bev, did you have a question? Bev, are you there? I thought someone raised their hand. No? Okay. All right then. This is what I'm talking about by winter interest. I think these things are lovely. So I like to leave my plants because they're beautiful with the snow. Of course, in the spring, they're soggy and messy, but you wait until the day when it's kind of dry and you rake it all out and very gently uncover any new growth that's coming up. But don't those look nice?
Mm-hmm.
So either way, some people leave all their things. Some people, like me, I remove all the vegetables, but I leave certain plants because I like the way they look.
Hi, I have a question.
Okay.
I guess it was for the other ones, that the perennials. Do I
Yeah.
cut down my hydrangea to the crown like that?
No, not a shrub. No, this one is
Oh, okay.
talking about shrubs, not shrubs. We're talking about perennial
Oh, okay.
flowers. Shrubs and trees are treated differently. Um,
And a hydrangea is a shrub.
yes, we're going to be
Okay.
talking about that in just a second. When you're
All
doing,
right, I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay. Whenever you have a question, please ask it. Trees and shrubs are usually left until late winter, early spring. But when you have dead, diseased, or damaged limbs, you need to remove them as soon as it's safe to do it. Don't get in on a ladder with a chainsaw in the middle of winter, please. Leave that for the professionals. Okay, flowering shrubs. If your hydrangea, when does your hydrangea bloom? In the spring or in the fall?
They're new this year. I have some in the spring, and I do have some that are blooming now in the
Okay.
late.
If it blooms in the fall, you want to prune it in the spring because those blooms are on the new wood. They're on the wood that grows next spring. If it blooms in the spring, you want to prune it after it blooms because it's growing on the old wood. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so this is the same pretty much with any flowering shrub. If you have forsythia, for instance, you want to prune it after it blooms because it's going to bloom next spring on the growth it puts out this year. Okay, mulching in winter. Why do we mulch? What? Did we have a question or comment? No?
No, I don't know what that noise was.
Okay. You want to mulch in the winter to protect the crowns. And again, the crown is where the stems come together with the roots. You want to keep it from heaving, and heaving is a result of freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, and it actually pushes the whole crown, sometimes the whole plant, out of the soil. If it's mulched, it won't be susceptible to that because you're maintaining the frozen state. Okay, you want to prevent desiccation. These trees are a pain. I like them. I just cut one down that had been here for a long time by my front doors where I put my Christmas lights, and it hurt my heart to remove it, but it had been desiccated year after year after year after year because it was getting the south wind, and it just reached a point where it didn't look nice anymore. But you can prevent that. There are products you can use. People wrap their trees in burlap, and mulching also prevents erosion. So it's important, but how you do it is even more important. Okay, you want to keep your plants dormant. That's why you mulch. You don't mulch them before they go dormant. The idea of mulch is not to keep the ground from freezing, it's to keep it from thawing. Okay, so you want to mulch after the plant is dormant and after the ground is very cold or almost frozen. That makes sense? Because it's not to keep it from freezing, it's to keep it frozen. okay? Because you don't want it freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, because it's not good for the plant and it might heave. Usually around here it's between Thanksgiving and Christmas when it gets cold enough to go ahead and mulch. These are different things that you can mulch. We kind of ask, it's not usually a good idea to use hay because hay contains a lot of weed seeds. So use straw, use bark, use pine needles. And pine needles, by the way, do not add acidity to your soil. They don't lower your, or don't raise your pH level. That is a myth. Okay, so any insulating mulch will do. In the spring, you can rake it aside. So you want something that'll come off easy. Shredded mulch, straw, pine needles, or shredded leaves, all easy to remove. So if you have a lot of trees, shred the leaves with a lawnmower or a shredder if you have one, and use those to mulch. Okay, if your ground doesn't freeze until after Christmas, you can use boughs of your Christmas tree. They're nice because they're easy to remove. The easiest mulch is snow cover. Snow insulates. Okay, they say snow is a farmer's fertilizer because it does contain some minerals. It keeps the ground frozen. It protects the soil. It protects the plants underneath it. And some plants will just collapse on themselves, like chrysanthemums. Let them collapse on themselves because they are mulching themselves. And then in the spring, you remove the wet, soggy leaves. Any questions about that? No? Okay. I know these are trees, but this, yeah, these are trees. Gosh, darn, how they get in there? This pertains to any kind of plant. If you put too much mulch up against the base of the plant, this we call a mulch volcano, the one on the left here. You have to leave a space between the mulch and where the trunk or stem goes into the soil. You have to leave that crown open. It needs air, it needs moisture, and it keeps some of the bark eating animals or the stem eating animals from eating your stuff. Because for instance, a vole, and there one is, cute little thing. Right. Cute. There's the tree damage he did. Because voles wander around under the soil or under the snow. Okay, so, and what they eat is the bark off of young trees, especially older trees, if that's what they can find. So under the snow, they're moving around, and you won't know they're there. And they do that because predators can't see them either. So they move around underneath the snow and they eat the bark off your tree. Now, if they girdle the tree's going to die, because the xylem and phloem that keeps the nutrients going up and down that tree are right under the bark. So if the mole, squirrel, vole eats the bark, I saw a porcupine a little while ago. Porcupines are good for bark eating too. Squirrels don't eat it though. They use it to make nests. Porcupines eat it, voles eat it. So this tree it doesn't look like it's girdled all the way around, but this one side is, so that tree's probably only gonna produce leaf on one side of it. And the image on the right shows a bowl trail after the snow was melted. I had a heck of a time. I had a lot of bowl trails last spring, a lot of bowl trails. Okay, so that's it's a key thing for wildlife damage. So if you can keep, first of all, the mulch isn't up against the stem. If you can keep some of the snow, especially with trees, keep a space between the snow and the tree because the voles they won't put themselves in danger of being, eaten by a predator. So if you don't have a lot of trees, or you have one that you're particularly fond of, or you have new trees, it's wise to make the effort to keep the snow right off against the trunk. Okay. Insects are cold-blooded. Their temperatures rise and fall with the air temperature. Some can't take the cold of winter and they die off. But although the adults die, the eggs, larvae, and pupae are able to survive by entering diapause. What? This guy, let's see. Yeah, okay. You know about the woolly, what's it called? The brown woolly caterpillar? The woolly caterpillar? You know the
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the way the story goes, the amount of brown in the middle of the black spaces on the caterpillar indicate what kind of a winter we're going to have. Okay. The longer the brown thing is milder. Middle size is average. If it's really small, it means we're going to have a severe winter. Now, how many of you believe that's true? Nobody's saying, I do. Okay, we'll presume you don't, because it's not true. It's a myth.
Ah.
I know you hate to think it. Diapause, semi-frozen state that insects go into, and they thaw out in the spring. It's almost as though their blood produces something, or their body produces something kind of like antifreeze. It's not hibernation, it's diapause. And this is what that brown woolly caterpillar turns into, an Isabella tiger moth, 2 inches. Isn't that pretty? So don't squish your woolies. Well, you can if you want to, but I don't want to squish mine. Okay, balls. These are the little nodules. Some of them can be quite large on the tops, usually of leaves. They are made when an insect bites the surface of the leaf, and the leaf responds by creating tissue, and the tissue encompasses the insect. And they stay in there, they're living very happily, they pupate, and in the spring, they become adults, wasps, flies, beetles, and moths. We have a lot of galls. There are 1,500 gall-forming insects in North America. Some of them can be really large. Some of them, they don't hurt the tree, but they make it, some people don't like the way they look. Once they become like this, there's not much you can do about it, because the insect is protected inside that tissue, inside the gall, and anything that you try to put on it to dispose of it is not going to work. So don't worry about it. When the leaves fall off the tree, stop and move them away. Get rid of them.
Fight? You want to
Okay.
fight? Oh.
Questions? No? Okay. You want to add organic matter to your garden now, or when you're doing your cleanup. Pieces of crop, composted, if you have compost, or you want to purchase compost. Animal manure, not dog or cat, usually not pig either. Any kind of animal that is able to transmit diseases to humans, you don't want to use manure from those animals. Chicken is fine, cow is fine, horse is fine. You can plant cover crops, which is called green manure. Some of them can be planted now, like the rye comes up quick. Some of them they die back in the winter, and then they're easy enough to kind of work into your soil in the spring. Some of them you have to till, though. Any grasses you have, or legumes, those are the beans. The beans roots very nutritious for the soil. They lock in nitrogen. Okay. Fall lawn care. Recommendations for feeding are after Memorial Day, if you need it, and after Labor Day in the fall, which is, that's the recommendation, is Labor Day. And I'll tell you why. Because if you fertilize after Memorial Day, you're not really feeding the roots. You get a flush of green, but it's not feeding the roots. If you feed after Labor Day, or 2 weeks after the last fall mowing, but before the ground starts to freeze, you have to really watch. That's not marked on the calendar anywhere. But it's an extensive root system. It grows that root system. And then in the spring, it pushes up top growth. It's got strong, it makes it less vulnerable to insects, diseases, and drought. So that's win. Okay, we're almost done. How many of you get your soil tested for pH? No one?
I have a pH tester kit, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay. What are you waiting for?
It was just to see what the pH was for my hydrangeas to bloom blue or pink.
Mm-hmm. Does everyone understand what pH is, what it tells us?
No.
Okay. If you notice that at different pH, the pH levels are across the bottom. It actually runs from like 0 to 14, but one is like acid, battery acid, and the other one is, something that no one would ever find in the soil or anywhere, hopefully. So there are the pH values, and across the top tells you strongly acid, strongly alkaline, and then what's in between. So if your soil is, what we say for a garden is between 6.0 and 6.5. If you go up from 6.5, that's ideal for a garden, for tomatoes. Blueberries are a whole other story. But for tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, peppers, the things that we would normally grow, or most people would grow, average, or what we consider normal pHs or ideal, is 6.0 to 6.5. So say our pH is 6.5, all of these minerals are available in these amounts at 6.5. If you look up straight up from 6.5, it's very slightly acid, and so you have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, plus the iron, manganese, boron, copper, and zinc are all available, and we want that. That's what we want. If you're growing blueberries and you're growing them in 6.5 or 7, I had somebody the other day whose pH was 7.8, and he wanted to grow blueberries. Blueberries, pH over 5, you're not going to get good blueberries. They have a very low pH. They need an acidic soil. So I kind of liken it to if you came to my house and you were hungry. I'm always hungry. I know everyone's always hungry, right? And I had just been grocery shopping, and I have a refrigerator full of food. And I said, I have a refrigerator full of food. Help yourself. And you go to my refrigerator and you go to open the door, and I have a chain around it. And you can only open the door 4 inches. What you can access from that refrigerator is very limited. That's kind of like pH. If you don't have the proper pH for your crop or your flowers or your hydrangea, what the roots can access is very limited. So pH tells you what is available to the plant, to the tree, to the hydrangea, to the blueberries at certain pHs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yes.
it does. Say out, yes, it does, everyone. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
It does, honey bun.
Okay, so pH, I do pH testing. If you want pH testing, charge $5 for the chemicals we use. Take a soil sample, and if you have a garden patch that's say 10 by 10, take maybe 4 samples 6 inches down with, use a spade or a spoon or a coring thing. Do that, take samples, maybe four different spaces within that 10 by 10, 6 inches down, put it in a bag, all of them, all 4 in one bag, or a plastic container or a glass jar. Don't use metal, no cans, anything like that, no metal, and mix them together. Bring them to the office, give them your $5. I'm working from home yet. I pick them up, I pick samples up of vegetables or disease stuff or identification or soil samples for pH testing every Thursday. I pick them up. I'm usually there by 10. So if you can get things there on Wednesday, tomorrow would be good. I dry it and I test it. And then I let you know what the pH is. If it's too high for what you're growing, I can tell you how much sulfur, elemental sulfur, to add into the soil to lower that pH. If it's too low for what you want to grow, I tell you how much lime you need to put in order to bring it up to a level, a pH level that will support the crops that you want to grow. Fall is the perfect time to try to adjust pH, because the chemicals, well, not chemicals, the elemental sulfur or lime that we use to adjust it, it takes a while for it to break down, incorporate into the soil. So if you do it in the fall, you should have a different pH when it's tested in the spring. If you do it in the spring, you're not going to have a change until the fall. It takes 4 to 6 months for that to happen. So if you want to do the pH, there's a form to fill out that's on our website, and it works really well. Okay, I want
I
to.
had a question about pH. You said that pine needles do not change the pH. That was a myth. What about cedar?
I don't know about cedar. I don't know about cedar. I would have to look into that, but I'd be happy to do that and let you know.
Well, I can probably look it up too. I just didn't know. I just thought of that.
Okay, looking things up. First of all, this is my email address. Our website, there's a lot of information. Let me see if I can share the website. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, this is our website. Now you can see it?
Mhm.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, these are the different things we do. We have agriculture. We really don't do energy anymore. Environment, fitness, food and nutrition, gardening, home and family, 4-H. So if you go to the website, it has right here over on the right-hand side how to submit a soil sample.
Okay.
But if you look at, I'm under gardening. So if you go to gardening, these are, I'm doing blogs, I'm doing what's the matter with my whatever. These are all the different things we do. If you go to, let's see, where is it? North Country Gardening Newsletters. We have them all the way back to 2011. So my most recent one was July and August. And this is it. And Kim helped me learn how to do this years ago. Okay, so we do Paul Hetzler. He's retired from the CCE St. Lawrence. He can write like nobody else. He's really good, really good. These are pictures I put up about, these are my bee things. We have coffee drinks from our nutrition educator. More coffee drinks. So my plate, also nutrition. Another article from Paul. Chemistry. This is a 4-H thing. Has experiments usually for kids and discussions to have with them. This is my thing for the Master Gardeners and CCE. This is turtle that laid eggs in my yard. and some pictures I took. What to do with produce, supporting local farmers, and each one is different. So if you're interested in that, I just need your email address, and I would be happy to put you on my distribution list, and you can see that. So these are all the different things that are under our CCE extension, Clinton County. I think it's a good program. We like it. We've done good on this one, I think. Okay, so I want to get back to this. Stop the share. There is one more thing I want to show you that I think you'll find very helpful. Let me go back to, let's see, it is my PowerPoint. Okay, I'm in PowerPoint again. Take that off. Did I go out of my PowerPoint? No, I didn't. Okay, here. This topic space::edu. If you're looking for information, I think it would benefit you to get research-based information. If you Google powdery mildew, right across the top of what you get is going to be sprays. You know, it's advertisement for sprays. If you Google lawn food, instead of getting, you're going to get people trying to sell you lawn food, especially that four season lawn food is totally unnecessary, but people buy it. So, but if you put in powdery mildew, leave a space, and then a ::edu. The sites that come up are going to be researches. They're going to be universities. It'll be Cornell. It'll be University of Oregon State has a good one. If you're interested in insects or invasive species, Rhode Island University. So using that, put in the topic, leave a space, do ::edu. You're going to get research-based facts. It's not anyone's idea of what's going to work. It's facts, and that's the best way to, I think, go about it. You know, it's a source you can trust. Let's put it that way. Okay. So if you can kind of take a moment, let me know if you found this program useful, too long, too short, suggestions to improve it, and were your questions answered, I would appreciate it. Okay? All right. And with that, I will say goodbye.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. It was nice to see you all.
Bye, Jolene. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Noe.